Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to crack open the JavaScript developer's toolbox. We're zeroing in on one of the most fundamental tools inside, the function. And if you've ever looked at all those tools and thought, man, are there really this many ways to do the same thing? Well, you're definitely not alone.
So you've stared at a bunch of JavaScript code, right? And you see all these different ways to write a function. And you're thinking, why? Why so many? It's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of how the language has grown. But here's the thing, it's not just about what looks nicer. Each one of these function styles has a specific purpose, and by the time we're done here, you're going to know exactly which one to reach for and when.
All right, so before we can really get into the nitty-gritty of comparing all these different styles, let's just make sure we all agree on the basics. What even is a function?
Okay, at its core, a function is basically a recipe. It's a block of code you write once to do a specific thing. Then you can just call on that recipe over and over again whenever you need it, without having to write out all the steps each time. It's all about that dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. And honestly, this is the fundamental idea that keeps our code from becoming a complete disaster. It's how we stay organized and sane.
All right, let's get into it. We're going to start with the two OGs of JavaScript functions, the function declaration and the function expression. These are the classics, the ones that have been around forever.
So, you look at these two side by side, and they look pretty much the same, don't they? I mean, they both use that function keyword, they both do the same job, but, and this is a big but, there's one crucial difference in how JavaScript sees them before your code even starts running. And it's all about this concept called hoisting.
Okay, here's the key takeaway. Function declarations get hoisted. Now, what does that mean? It means the JavaScript engine kind of picks them up and moves them to the top of their scope behind the scenes. So you can actually call a function before it appears in your code. Super useful sometimes. But function expressions? Nope. They're assigned to variables, so they're not hoisted. You have to define them first, then you can use them, just like you would with any other variable.
Seriously, if you only remember one thing from this part, let it be this right here. Declarations are hoisted, expressions are not. This one little difference is everything. It's what decides which one you should use. If you want to organize your code so your main logic is at the top and all your helper functions are at the bottom, a declaration is perfect for that. But if you need to control exactly when a function can be used, maybe inside an if statement, then an expression is what you want.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. We're moving on to a much more modern tool, the arrow function. When this came out with ES6, everyone thought it was just about making code shorter. And yeah, it does that, but that's not the real reason it's so great. It was actually designed to clean up our code and fix some really common problems.
So first things first, arrow functions are famous for being super short, but don't let that fool you. They can totally handle complex logic. If your function has multiple lines, multiple steps, you just use the good old curly braces and a return statement. No problem at all, just like you would with any other function.
But this is where things get really cool. Think about how many times you write a function that just does one thing and returns a value. Well, with arrow functions, you can just get rid of all the extra stuff. The curly braces, gone. The return keyword, you don't need it. It's implicit. And just like that, your code is so much cleaner and easier to read.
And it gets even better. If you've only got one single parameter, you can even ditch the parentheses around it. I mean, look at that. It's so clean. This is really the ultimate example of how concise and elegant arrow functions can be for those simple one-off tasks.
Okay, so let's recap. The shorter syntax is great. We love it. The implicit return is awesome. But that third point on the screen, that is the real reason arrow functions are a game changer. They do not have their own this context. Now, if you've been doing JavaScript for a while, you know the pain. You know how this keyword can be a total nightmare inside callbacks. Well, arrow functions just solved that. They inherit this from whatever scope they're in. That's not just a nice feature, that's a massive bug fix for the entire language. It makes our code so much more predictable and reliable.
All right, time to pull out our real specialist tool from the box. This one's called an IIFE, which is a mouthful, I know. It stands for Immediately Invoked Function Expression, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It's a function that just runs itself instantly.
Yeah, I know. The syntax looks kind of weird at first, all those parentheses. But trust me, it makes total sense when you break it down. You're basically just taking a regular function without a name an anonymous function, then you wrap that whole thing in parentheses. That's just to tell JavaScript, hey, treat this as a single thing. And then you add that final pair of parentheses at the very end, and that's what actually runs it. Boom.
So why would you ever do this? What's the point? It's all about creating privacy. It's like putting up a wall around your code. Any variable you create inside that IIFE, it's trapped. It can't leak out and mess with the rest of your code. This is perfect for things you only need to do once, like kicking off your app or setting up a library. It keeps the global space clean and prevents all sorts of nasty bugs from happening.
Okay, so let's take a step back and look at our workbench. We've got our classic declarations, our flexible expressions, our super clean arrow functions, and our specialized IIFEs for privacy. Now let's put it all together. Let's create a dead simple guide so you know exactly which tool to grab for the job. This is it. This is your cheat sheet. Let's make it super simple. If you absolutely need to call a function before it's written in the code, a function declaration is your only option. That's what hoisting is for. For pretty much everything else, especially for things like callbacks or short utility functions, the arrow function is going to be your best friend. It's clean, it's concise, and it solves that whole this problem. And for that one specific job, running some setup code that needs to stay private, you pull out the IIFE. See? It's all about picking the right tool for the right situation.
You know, at the end of the day, this isn't about memorizing a bunch of weird syntax rules. It's about understanding your tools so you can write code with intention. Each of these function types gives you a different power, a different capability. And knowing which one to use and why, that's what separates good developers from great ones. It makes your code cleaner, more robust, and easier to understand. So, now you've seen the toolkit. The real question is, what are you going to build?